I used to shame myself with that. Know better, do better. Originally,
I know better. Why am I not doing better?
Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
why do I keep doing the same shit
so
when
like,
I know better?
I know these things as an adult,
Had that
and
same
yet I can't stop. I know now why I self-sabotage.
What's wrong with me?
And why can't I stop doing it?
I'm broken. I'm stupid.
Right?
I'm worthless because I keep doing these things.
Because the part of me that is self-sabotaging isn't 43 years old.
Right?
It's 5.
Trying to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Try to explain to a 5-year-old a concept that your 43-year-old brain and emotional body and lived experience has and understands, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. I'm excited for some ice cream. Next time I need some ice cream, I'm going to be like, man, look at you. Yeah. Such a big act of self-love. Why don't you just have a little bit, right? You don't need to eat the whole fucking gallon.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
Self-sabotage is one of those things that we have been doing the vast majority of our life. And I'm going to continue and talk in this voice for the entire episode, so stay tuned. We're excited to explore the topic because it's one of those things, like we said, that we've done forever. Mm-hmm. We still do it on a regular basis. And we're going to share with you some insights as far as why we believe it's done, why we think it's something that we all struggle with, and some ideas maybe around what you can do to shift out of it. But before we get to that, we want to share some actual personal stories of some catastrophic, that was the word I was looking for. Some catastrophic examples of self-sabotage that we've experienced.
Well, go for it.
Okay, baby.
Okay, let's do it.
I was going to push the ball into your court.
I knew you were. I was ready.
I was going to throw it at you.
I was just like, I considered it a check, and I was checking it right back at you. Here you go.
Yeah.
Ball's in your court.
You don't really play a lot of sports with balls, do you?
I thought that was the basketball thing. You check it.
No.
And then they check it back.
Oh, that's kind of a thing. Like if you're playing like pickup ball. You don't really play a
lot of sports with balls, do you?
The beginning of the Steph Craig show started in November or December. I think it was December because we recorded the last episode of our other podcast in December. And at that point, we were still planning on continuing with that other podcast. So somewhere along the way, we came up with the idea of a brand new show, this whole entire set. Like this thing that you're looking at now on camera was a massive effort of all sorts of different things. We had to confront so many different shadows and parts of ourselves and fears that we had. And we also had to mortgage our house in order to pay for everything. We had to do all sorts of different things. And
no fears coming up with that.
Yeah, it was fine. We were totally secure. And then when the time came to actually start recording episodes for this podcast, we just froze. And then we started to backslide into self-sabotage. We started to do all sorts of things that were, there were days where we just wouldn't do anything podcast related or, and not just days, like weeks and months. Like I would say probably pretty consistent for the beginning of 2024, January, February, and the majority of March, we didn't do anything. And we had all this stuff that we could do. Like we had everything. We had the equipment, and there's obviously a bunch of things on the back end behind the scenes and putting together a podcast and everything. And we just straight up froze.
Yeah.
We stopped doing it. And there's reasons why, and we're going to talk about those reasons. But I think that's probably one of the biggest recent examples in my life of self-sabotage, where I just froze and started doing the opposite of what I actually wanted to do because I was so freaking scared. Right?
Yeah.
I can think back of every job that I've ever had. I think I sabotaged it in some capacity. And that might be a stretch. There might be a job somewhere along the lines that I didn't actually do that. But I don't think so. I think I, in some way, sabotaged every job. I sabotaged every relationship that I've ever been in, right? Including ours.
Yes.
I managed to really just go to town on our relationship and do the best that I could to blow it up. So those are my stories, babe. I'm going to now back to Steph.
Now back to me. I tend
I'm teasing.
to.
Those aren't just my stories.
I'll take
those are the only times that I've
self-sabotaged. That's it. That's just it. Just every job, every relationship. You started out pretty easy. You just talked about the podcast, and I was like, man, you threw the ball to me.
It was so funny how much we did that with this show, though.
Right. But I also had awareness when you were saying that. I'm like, we absolutely did. We're self-sabotaging like crazy. and we'll talk about why and it'll make sense. But there's also part of me that says we did our previous podcast, was 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah.
Like it was also okay that
We took a break.
We took a break because we mortgaged our house. We designed a studio. We got some amazing help. I'm looking over to our awesome producer, Matt. And so we're super grateful he's here. We took steps to allow help in and started creating and couldn't record shit. So we still did a lot and we took a break. And then we self-sabotaged too.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I was thinking about this the other day. I was listening to some other podcast and they were talking about how, it's the whole narrative around like how much we need to relax and like downtime and rest and recovery and how hard of a thing that is for people.
You just said relax and I got mad.
Right?
Yeah, just the word relax.
I didn't tell you to relax.
I was going to say, how much we need to relax. I'm like, oh, so we're fighting.
I didn't tell you to take a deep breath.
Right?
I didn't tell you to relax. I definitely didn't tell you to calm down.
Yeah, you definitely didn't do that. You're smart.
But you might need to relax a little bit. The whole idea of our nervous systems have been activated for 40 years. And that might seem like an extreme. And of course, there were some down periods, right?
It's like you missed a couple years from me. We need to tack on a couple.
But the recognition of like what it takes your nervous system to just kind of regulate back into this really happy place where it's calm and collected, and being able to stay in that zone of calmness, I guess, right? That's totally a scientific term, by the way.
The calm zone?
The calm zone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
it's better than the danger zone.
There. When I was being able to stay in that regulated space for an extended period of time is really challenging and really hard. And I have to battle against that narrative of I'm not doing enough. So my whole story with this podcast and with the show was I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. Every day I would wake up and I'd be like, I'm not doing anything. We've got all this equipment. We've got all this gear. We've got all these things, lights, cameras, all this stuff that had to, we had to set it up. We had to figure it all out. We had to learn about all these kind of different things to do this show. And I wasn't doing any of it. And the reality is, obviously, we did stuff, right? It's not like we didn't do anything. We just weren't doing things at a level and at a pace that I guess we were judging ourselves for.
I'm going to say we were shooting ourselves into.
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing this.
Right.
We should be doing this much.
In my mind, when we decided to do the show, it was going to be like, oh, we'll probably be able to launch middle of January.
Yeah.
Right? We'll probably be able to turn this bitch around in a month and get it ready to go, and we'll be fine. We'll be ready to go in January. And then like, ooh, as everything started to come together, I'm like, it might be February. It might be February. And then eventually I'm just like, are we ever doing this podcast? I don't know if it's ever happening.
We kept making it we kept upping our commitment to it. We kept upping how much we were going to go in. And like that was a process, a step to get to where instead of being like we went from like toes to ankles to knees before we decided, you know what? Like screw the floaties, we are jumping in.
Yeah.
We just and as soon as we went all in, of course that's scary.
Of course we froze and panicked.
Of course there's a little bit of freeze. And you mentioned something that was like really significant too. the calm, how hard it is to be calm, to rest. And like both of us have that experience where calm didn't equal safe. We didn't know what to do. It's not that it was necessarily bad. We just didn't know what to do or what to expect with calm. But when things are chaotic, we know what that looks like. We know what that feels like. We know what to do. We have a plan when things are chaotic. So.
Yeah, we launched the podcast on May 1st. I got a big old cough in my throat.
Yeah. Do you want to hold one of my throat rocks?
I don't want to hold one of your throat rocks. Thank you,
hold the bigger throat rock?
I'm good.
Okay. I got another one.
We launched the podcast on May 1st, but we actually didn't start recording episodes for the podcast until April. Mm-hmm. And that
we planned on starting in March.
Right? Early March. Uh-huh. And then we just didn't fucking do it.
Right.
And I liked when you started having awareness around this idea of like why you self-sabotage, right? And the whole reason behind it, because it made a lot of sense to me. Excuse me. And I could look back over the course of life, my life and see when and how I was doing that. And then everything started to make sense.
Yeah. It opens up a lot of compassion and understanding for yourself.
Yeah, so it's like no big surprise. The reason we believe, I don't know, is it a big surprise?
I mean, it was for me because it was like I do it when things are going well, right?
You sabotage when things are going well.
It's when things are going well. When things aren't going well, I sit in and stew until I bust out. And then I'm like, here we go. And I have all that momentum, all that like, fuck that momentum. So that propels me forward that I think I count on, right? I've always known that it's been there to like when shit hits the fan, I then know what to do and I can do it. And all of the motivation that I needed that I didn't have, suddenly I've got an endless supply. I can go. And of course there's part of me that recognizes and, wants to tap into that because I want to go. I don't want to be frozen. I don't want to be calm. And I feel frozen and calm a lot, right? So not calm. I feel frozen. I feel calm a lot. No, I don't. That was a misstep. Or maybe I do feel calm a lot now. That sounds like care a lot. It sounds like Care Bears. Okay, I won't squirrel away.
Care Bears?
Yeah, care a lot. It's where the Care Bears live.
I didn't hear what you said though.
Calm a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Other than, sort
Camelot?
of Camelot, I guess.
Camelot.
I guess it sounds more like that. But just having the awareness that when things are going well, like the most recent one, I've been trying to get my body healthy, trying to do things that's going to help balance my hormones and take care of myself. And I got into a really, really good routine. I was working out at least 5 times a week. I was committed. I was sticking to it. I was feeling good. I was noticing my body getting stronger. And then I even had other people start to notice that I was shedding some weight. So what did I do?
Sabotage.
Just stopped fucking doing everything. Like, well, we're done. I guess I can't work out now. And I created an ear infection that made, no.
Oh, yeah. We had episodes that we were going to be recording for the podcast, and then your ear infection.
Yeah, I was like, that started when we were going to record our first one.
Yeah.
So I got this massive ear infection that just completely wiped me out.
Yeah,
made me lose days. I was
and...
like, my whole head was clogged. I couldn't hear anything out of my right ear. It just took me out. And then that was the great excuse to not get moving again. There was a time that I was like thinking, going through, I'm like, what does my body think I benefit from? Self-sabotage. How is this benefiting me? I keep going back to it. Like, so what am I getting from it? Because I can recognize that when I'm at the last minute, when the pressure's really on, that here I go, then I can get things done. But I hate feeling pressure. I hate pressure, so I avoid it. Don't give me a list of things. I like creating my own list, but don't anybody else give me a list of things, right? So I hate pressure.
That reminds me, I've got something you got to do after
expectations,
this.
right? I'm not going to do it. Or I'm going to try to. I'm going to want to. That's the thing, is I want to, but I can't.
Yeah.
This expectation just slams me out. So I'm like, I can use momentum when it's really stressful, when it's a moment that action needs to happen right now, the go mode, the adrenaline, and the pressure's on. When it's last minute, I can get things. I can't do it before then, but when it's time to go, it's that last minute. Now it's time to go and I can go. So I recognized how I use that to get things done. And there's times I'm like, I'll happen. I even called it a just in time. I was like, I get things done just in time, to put a cute little label on it. That lasted for a week. And I was like, that's stupid. So I was like, what am I getting from this? What do I get from self-sabotage? Why do I self-sabotage when things are going well for me? When I'm in a good relationship, when I'm in a safe place, when the job's going well, when you get the promotion, when your body's starting to get healthy, when you're making healthy food choices, when you're having healthy interactions. Why do I self-sabotage? It's because then I'm getting some sense of control back. I don't have a lot of experience with things working out, even though I do, well. Right? But according to my brain, things being safe. Even though I've been safe for quite a while now, my brain still lives in a space of trauma, right? I didn't know what to expect. There's still a lot of healing that's coming through. So I don't feel like I have control because I don't know what to expect. It's that thing of like you choose the devil that you know. So if I self-sabotage, then I know what to expect because I've self-sabotaged my whole life. I know what to expect. I know that it's going to fall apart. I know that I get to blame myself. I know that it gets to throw me in a depression. Even though all that's horrible and it's the last thing I want, it's familiar. And we talked about we get to, right? How familiarity is what we tend to lean towards. It doesn't mean that it's the safe choice. It's not the good choice, but we go towards what we know, what is familiar. So things are going really well. My body's getting healthy. Our relationship's thriving. Our podcast is taking off. Our business is thriving. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I know.
Let's fuck this up.
Right? Oh, now I know what to do. Now I get to be back in self-loathing. Now I get to have if only I would have. And there's also that comfort because if I sabotage it, then I still get to live in the fantasy of it could have worked if I didn't, as opposed to maybe it doesn't work and I gave it my all. Then what do I do with it? So all the ways that the narrative creates comfort and a familiar sense for me of why I self-sabotage. I don't want to do that.
This is really, I think when you shared this with me, just the awareness of I self-sabotage as a way to control the outcome. Mm-hmm. I self-sabotage as a way to know what's coming next. Mm-hmm. Like looking at it through that lens and from that perspective suddenly opened up a whole other, it's like you just took my awareness and you allowed me to shift and see all of these previous times in my life. Because like I said, every job that I've ever had, every relationship, like ours included, we told this story, I think, where we've shared a lot about our relationship, but in the beginning, everything was really great. And then everything starts going really bad. And we have some outside forces that are shaping that, right? But at the same time, I think there was a big chunk of it that was very much this, where neither one of us knows how to be in a healthy relationship.
We had no idea.
We only know how to be in toxic relationships. Mm-hmm. We only know how to be in really unhealthy relationships. And I only know how to behave in an unhealthy relationship subconsciously.
Yeah.
Right? On the surface, I, think that I know what I'm doing, but I have no fucking idea. Yeah. Subconsciously, I know how to show up in a relationship in a really unhealthy way. And so I think when you shifted that perspective for me and looking at it through that lens of like, okay, I'm self-sabotaging as a way to control my environment, to control my reality, then it really started to make me think about and look at what does control mean to me? Like, what am I actively controlling and what's my relationship with control? Because then it just became like, oh, fuck. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of, so I have like really early wounds of trauma from being like little, like being a child and having really traumatic experiences. And then I can think about how I used to like, I don't want to say fuck up because as a kid, you don't really know what you're doing, right? But I would like go to school or friends or all of these kind of like little things that kids have to start navigating. I can see how I would like fuck them up. Like I told you a story not long ago about like 8th grade, my English teacher thinking that Craig was something special and needed like extra work because he wasn't being challenged enough. And I don't know why I can't.
Oh, you're good. I do remember that story.
Right?
Yeah.
And how much of that was me self-sabotaging at however old I was in 8th grade. What's that, like 12 or 13 years old?
I think it's like 14, yeah.
Because I have the ability to control what's happening, right? Something new is happening that I haven't experienced before maybe. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to control it by fucking it up and messing it up. And then it's like, how much of my life have I done that just so that I have some semblance of control? Mm-hmm. So when things start to feel out of control for me, or when they start to feel like unknown, where wait a minute, I don't know what to expect in this scenario. I don't know what's going to happen next. And oftentimes I think you're right. I think it is in a positive way, because negative things I'm okay with. And it's not to say I'm like happy about them, but when the shit hits the fan, you and I do a pretty good job of navigating those waters.
Yeah.
And our life over the past couple of years has just been getting better. And we haven't really had a lot of like fan or shit hitting of the fan stuff.
Right.
Right? It's been pretty good. And then I think about how uncomfortable that's been for us. And like the success of this podcast and the success of our business and all of these kind of different things that we've been growing into and expanding has been really uncomfortable. And in some ways, it very much feels like we don't have control over any of it. And again, I think like, what does that even look like? Because I think the reality is I don't have control over anything. Control is some facade of illusion. That's like a double entendre or something, but like it's an illusion that we have control because we're on this spinny rock in some crazy universe somewhere. And you know what I mean? None of it makes any sense. And so we have all of these self-constructed ideas of what that actually looks like or actually is, when in reality, I don't have any control over anything.
Yeah.
I just think that I do, or I pretend that I do. And so I don't know, what is that? The control aspect of it, what does that mean, or how does that resonate with you?
What it actually brought up for me is recognizing that it's like controlling love. It's controlling like receiving love. And I was like thinking of like how it related, and like maybe this will reflect out there, but my upbringing was expected to, on one hand, like here's the dichotomy, right? Or the paradox for me is, on one, it was, I was, oh my gosh, how am I going to express this? I'm getting caught up, like going to say it. Like,
Get your throat rock.
I dropped it. I have to get another one.
Put that
I
one
kept
up by your
dropping
throat.
it. Right? Okay. Okay. So this is what happens. I can feel like I'm getting incredibly nervous. My mouth is like turning into a desert. It is like super nerve-wracking right now, this thing that I've hit on. It is the amount of, oh my gosh, it just keeps coming back to love. I'm going to try and get it out. It's actually super triggering in this moment. So I had my safe parent that had all these like hopes and dreams for me, right? I was going to outshine and all the things that I could do, which was great, right? Also, don't be cocky, be humble, like do really good, but you can't like be proud of it. You gotta. So I had these expectations of doing it better than they did, doing it better, like just breaking free of all the blocks that they couldn't block. And then the other one was very different. The ruler parent was, you do not outshine them. Like you're supposed to do good so that they can be like, but don't ever do anything better than them. Like it was so intense on, if you start to do well and it takes away from time from them, it takes away from your responsibility. If it's something that they're not proud of you doing, right? It was very much a thing. So don't really do well. And you could really do well if you just applied yourself. So you're not working hard enough. You're not doing enough. And so here comes this thing. But if I self-sabotage, I knock it down, then I'm not pissing anybody off. And I guess I'm still getting attention, like in a sense from my safe parent, because if you do good, they don't notice. But if you're not, then they're focused. So all of these different ways that self-sabotage is going to come in with that. And that one, having that awareness makes me sick. Like that's why I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh man, I don't want anything to do with those. Those dynamics are done. And how much of it, like, those stopped being a thing for me a long time ago. But I did not stop playing in the realm. I kept that pattern and that behavior and that reality. I kept forcing that reality into my current reality and projecting those roles like onto you and onto others. Like I recreated it with everybody in my life so that I could have that excuse and also keep me safe from going to a space that I didn't know. So continue to self-sabotage, because then it's not going into the unknown, which brings it back to the control, and I know what's going to happen. Whew, that is a tangled web.
That is a tangled web.
That is a tangled web.
The idea that there was something that you said in that moment where it was, attention seeking.
Mm-hmm.
So put a pin in that, because I want to make sure that I talk about attention seeking. Put a pin in it.
Okay.
Hold on to it, because I had this other thought. How much, when we talk about so many different topics on the show that are really diving into unconscious things that we do. So subconscious actions and behaviors and beliefs and programs that are then acted out in conscious ways. So it's all of these things, like the self-sabotage is a perfect example. Is like, why in the hell would I screw this up? Mm-hmm. We want this podcast. This is a really big deal for us. This is a really cool thing for us. We're very excited about everything about this show. And it's a big deal, like in our realm and in our life, right? Hey, everybody. We just want to take a minute and really thank you for being here and choosing to listen to the podcast. We know there's a lot of options out there, and we don't take it lightly that you chose us. If you're enjoying the podcast, do us a favor and leave us a review wherever you're listening. All of those reviews and the 5 stars and all of that stuff, it really helps the podcast grow and expand and reach more people. We have a big mission with this show because we believe in the healing power of podcasting. That might seem silly to you, but we've both had life-changing experiences because of stuff that we've heard on podcasts. So if you want to help us on our mission to reach 1 million people, share the podcast as well with anybody that you think might benefit, because we believe that we all do better when we heal together. Thanks. Now let's get back to the show. Why on earth would we not lean into this and do this? And it's those subconscious programs. Like you said, all of those things that and I think that when you have new awareness of a new subconscious behavior and a new subconscious like program at play, right? Those are the moments where you're like, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like, how on earth do I now shift that thing up? Because it sucks. That's what I was putting a pin in, not self-sabotage. What was the pin thing?
Oh God, not attachment. Shit. Attention
seeking.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I had awareness of how often I do that.
Okay.
So I mean, like, there was a girl growing up when I was in school. There was more than one girl, but there was this girl growing up who would, like, everybody would be hanging out on the playground, and then they would go off into the far corner of the playground and, you know, in a huff or something was wrong or this. So then suddenly it was like, what's wrong with, Lisa? We have to go find out what's going on with Lisa. Okay. So then everybody would go, or a group of people would go over, or like all the other girls or whoever, right? Yeah. So suddenly it was like, I remember this girl doing this many, many times. Like, I remember in different various, hangouts and stuff like that, even up into like when we were 13, 14, 15 years old, suddenly everybody's hanging out at this party. And then there's always like that one girl or those that go off over here into some sort of drama in order to draw attention away and like attention seek. Right. And I remember seeing that growing up and thinking like, come on, really? Like, as a fucking 14-year-old being like, can't we be a little bit more mature than that? And then I'm like, I'm doing the same thing as a 43-year-old man at times with you, where I will subconsciously, not immediately, but there's plenty of times where I'll start doing things like that in order, like it happened recently, babe, where we were having some of those really hard conversations that we've had recently. And I could feel myself shifting into like, it's really sad and it's uncomfortable. It's giving me the same feeling that you had just a minute ago, because it's the subconscious behavior that I don't like looking at, but it's like putting on this performative act of emotion, see, words get hard when we get vulnerable. I could feel myself. It was so strange because I could feel myself pretending to act a certain way or pretending to be emotional, pretending to be sad. But
did you have the awareness that you were pretending?
I didn't have the awareness that I was pretending, but I had the awareness that what I was doing didn't feel genuine. And so then like after the fact and kind of even in it, I was like, because it's this wonky place of recognizing where I struggle with showing emotion, right? I struggle with being in emotion and expressing, especially when it's really hard things. And so I was like, no, this is a real emotion. But then I could, the part that not triggered me in a bad way, but I was keen in on, that was like, oh, look at what you're doing, was I wasn't getting the response from you that I wanted. And that's how I knew that I was doing something with an expectation of a response.
Interesting.
And so it was, because I could differentiate. I'm glad that I'm kind of articulating this now, because it makes a lot more sense to me. It's a thought that I've had, and it's on the long list of things that I intended to talk to you about at some point. And I guess we're talking about it on the podcast, but because I have awareness of like when I'm in emotion and I'm feeling emotions, right? And I don't have an expectation of like what you're supposed to do for me or how you're supposed to make me feel, or like, why aren't you making me feel better in this moment? I'm just feeling emotional. I'm just feeling sad or upset or grief, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell the difference between that dynamic, like when I'm feeling emotion and you're supporting me in that space. And then I had this other awareness of like, she's not giving me what I want in that moment. And I didn't even have like the cognitive, I wasn't sitting there in my head being like, she's not giving me what I want, but I could feel that I wasn't getting the feedback from you, that I was like, oh no, baby, when I do this thing, you do that thing. And you weren't doing that thing. Kudos to you, by the way, like for not doing that. I'm sure it was really, really hard. And that sounded minimizing. I'm sure it was really challenging in the moment. It definitely wasn't minimized. Oh, that sounded really, really hard for you.
I didn't hear it like that. Thank you for expressing. That's not how I heard it.
I had awareness in the moment that I was attention seeking, I guess. And that might be some aspect of what I was doing, right? I think sometimes we slap a label on something that makes it easier to contextualize, but then also we can really shame ourselves for it.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, that's okay, right? In that moment, I was very much in my wounded inner child stuff. I was very much in some really deep pain. So it makes sense that I would be using that.
Of course, those coping mechanisms are going to pop up when you're in immense pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when they pop up. Like, that makes total sense. I totally understand that.
It was hard. I don't like it. And it like I said, it ties back into the idea of control.
Yeah.
Like, that's me in the moment trying to control the situation because I have an immense amount of emotion that I'm feeling that feels out of control.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you feel was out of control in that moment? What was different than, what were you trying to regain control of? Do you have awareness?
I think it was just emotions. I think it was just because I was in so much.
But like, what specific emotion?
Fear. Like, there's parts of fear, and we might be splitting hairs here, but there's parts of fear that, I mean, they're super panic inducing, right? Like, there's a difference between, I wake up in the middle of the night and I got to go pee, and I'm afraid that it's, like our closet door's open and I'm like, fuck, there's something standing in the closet looking at. That fear feels different than like the feeling inside of my body is too much, like chaotic fear inside of me. Does that make sense?
So it was like an overfilling of chaos, like an overstimulation in a
Overwhelm.
sense, like had like an excess.
I guess, yeah.
You guess? Well, what do you mean? Like,
well, I don't know. Like,
okay.
I'm emotionally.
Well, let's try this.
5 at sometimes.
So you don't have to say it, but think about, because you had recognition or awareness that I wasn't playing my role.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't giving you the reaction that you wanted or that you were looking for in that place.
Mm-hmm.
So without naming the action or reaction, unless you want to, by all means, you're free to. I'm just not putting you on the spot for it. Can you tap in to what it would have felt like if I would have given it?
I think if you would have given it in the moment.
How would that have benefited you?
It wouldn't have. I mean,
I know in the hindsight, but
right.
In the moment, you were looking for something that would have been soothing for you in that moment. Not that it was healthy. like understanding it was a coping mechanism, but in that moment, that's what your nervous system thought you needed.
Mm-hmm.
So what would that have been?
It probably would have calmed my nervous system.
But what?
I guess I don't understand what you...
What emotion? What what would you have felt? What would have been the receiving? Like, what did you feel that you did not have in that moment that you needed?
I'm starting to, I can't decide if I'm too activated in this moment trying to talk about something that's really hard and feeling really stupid. And so now I'm starting to like, do you know what I mean? Because it feels like you want something from me that I'm not giving.
Okay.
Like you have, there's plenty of times where we help each other through the process of understanding some sort of like deeper thing that we're going through, right? And then there's other times where I'm like too thick in it and all it feels like is criticism and judgment because you know what you're trying to get me to say and I can't come up with the right answer. And I don't think that's what you're doing. Like I fully recognize that you're trying to help in this moment, but I feel a little too lost in this conversation about this thing.
Okay.
To really put, like, now I'm like, I don't know what's up or down or where we started or what we're talking about
that totally
anymore.
Sucks. That's not how I want you to feel.
And so it's like, I recognized in the moment, in some ways, like in the moment, live action as it was happening, I had awareness that I wasn't getting from you what I wanted. And then that twinged something in my body that like, there was like my higher consciousness put a pin in that where it was like, hey, we're going to put a pin in that thought. You can't really feel it right now or understand it, but you just had awareness of something, Craig. So put a pin in it because you're going to think about that one later on. And then I thought about it later on. I'm like, fuck, why was I doing that? Why was I trying to, and there's words like manipulation, right? There's a part of me that feels like I was trying to manipulate you to give me something. And truthfully, like if people had I hate when we talk about stuff like this sometimes because I feel like when I say painted, nobody's painting me. I'm the one fucking talking about this, obviously, right? But if you had context for the entire conversation, it would make so much more sense. But there's context for this conversation and for a lot of the conversations that we have that we don't fucking share because they're little tiny inner child parts of us that we aren't ready to share on the podcast and things like that.
Yeah.
And so in the moment, I was trying to get you to make me feel better.
Okay. So.
And I was also, because the story that was being told in my head was that you were mad at me. And anytime I feel like you're mad at me, especially when I'm in like little wounded inner child stuff, you being mad at me equals you don't love me anymore. You are stopping, like literally love is cut off from me and I'm cast out. I'm done. You're done with me. Life is basically coming to an end.
That makes so much sense. I didn't know what emotion you felt. I wasn't leading you because I knew what I wanted you to say, but I knew something was there. Because when I was looking at it, I'm like, what am I getting from this? What am I benefiting? Why do I keep going back to this coping mechanism? Why do I keep revisiting this? Why is this my go-to? It must be serving a point. It must be helping. Not that it's healthy, but it must be giving me something that I need in that moment. So I was curious if we had that. And what you just tied it back to is you thought I was mad at you. And if I'm mad at you, then I don't love you and that you're losing love. And that it just like struck me because that's what I mentioned. Like it's a way to keep love. Keep love. If I outshine, I don't get love. If I don't shine enough, I don't get love. If I am too if I'm not difficult, then I'm forgotten. If, all of these ways it kept being to keep love, keep safety, because that's your primary thing, especially when you're a kid. You want love from your parents because they are your lifeline. Regardless of the kind of parents they are, that's how you literally stay alive as a child. And when you start to get older, you have other things that, you start to be able to pull from other areas. But if you don't get, if your parents don't keep you alive, if your caregivers don't keep you alive, you die.
Yeah.
So it's critical that little babies, little kids learn how to contort themselves to get love from the people that are taking care of them, no matter how fucked up or healthy and amazing it is. So that's what I was just like, what are you getting from that? What was the goal there? How was that benefiting you? Because me behaving in a certain way, responding in a certain way was the coping mechanism that you were reaching for to serve what point? And so just for me, once we start to see that, then it's not a, oh, I'm bad, I'm messed up, I'm manipulative, I can't get it right, I just always ruin things. It was like, okay, what is it that I'm actually looking for? And if we can tie it back to, I want to feel safe, I want to know what's happening, because my upbringing was so chaotic. I never knew what was going to happen. I never knew what mood the ruler parent was going to be in. I didn't know what chaos or punishment was going to ensue. So things that I don't know what's going to happen are terrifying. Even like if he was like completely raging, and that went on to other relationships in my life, I managed to recreate those. If the ruling partner was raging, and it was horrific, I hated that, right? I want out of that. But I knew what to do. I knew how to survive that environment. I knew how to, like, even if it fucking killed me, I knew what to do in those moments. So that was the known, that was the safe. And then having that, when you look at, I'm self-sabotaging, why? Because I'm afraid that she doesn't love me, right? This is where your mind is going, that I'm mad at you, that I don't love you. So how are you going to pull me in that moment? And if you have awareness of that, how do you think you would show up in that space? Now, in the moment, like you have awareness, you're like, oh, I don't feel like, and not in the reaction, she doesn't love me. That's a very different thing than the awareness. I'm feeling like I'm not loved. I'm feeling like I'm not safe. I'm feeling this. You're going to show up a little different. You're going to handle yourself a little different, lovingly. You're going to start to reassure yourself a little bit. Maybe I recognize that in those things, which is why there's times I don't respond that way, because I'm not engaging in that dynamic. I'm not engaging in that toxic cycle and that sabotaging cycle. I need to do a better job at it with myself. I need to quit sabotaging myself.
Right.
But it's that same thing as
Well, that brings up a good point.
What's that?
How many times are we, because self-sabotage it's up to you, right?
It's up to you.
It's self. So in the scenario that we just painted, end scene. See, that was just a scene. We were just pretending that didn't really happen. We don't talk about things like that on this podcast.
What are you doing there? We're safe. We're safe. We weren't just vulnerable. We're safe. No vulnerability here.
And that's
just
improv,
heal people.
Folks. That's improv. We're really good improv artists. No, when it's just the self and you're sabotaging, that self-sabotage is a coping mechanism that you and I both learned, and I think a lot of people learned in childhood, right? We're talking about, in order to control situations that are uncomfortable. In the scenario that I got done talking about with you and me, where I was manipulating you to make me feel better, you have a role in that, in a sense, even though it's all my stuff, right? But you very much actively chose not to participate and didn't, quote unquote, give me what I needed in that moment, which, lucky for me, we've done a lot of work and I'm able to process and understand and work on things, and not all the time, but when it comes to self-sabotage, a lot of times it's just me. There's nobody else across the table from me or in that dynamic. I'm the only one that has the ability to put the brakes on that unconscious behavior, that stuff that I'm doing that is directly correlated to old school coping mechanisms from when I was a kid. Nobody else is there.
Right.
It's me. I mean, getting ready for this podcast, not this specific episode, but for the show and getting everything prepped and ready to go, it was me just in my own toxic pattern of being frozen and afraid and not doing anything. There's nobody else there. How do I put the brakes on? How do I stop that behavior? How do I pull that stuff back when I'm the only one that's in control of it? I think it has to do with a couple of different things. So some of the stuff that was standing out to me as you were talking, and all of this was kind of starting to take shape in my head. So much of this has to do with, because we're talking about it from the perspective of fucking things up when things are going good, and how that is us subconsciously recreating, environments and situations that we're used to because we grew up in unsafe environments and when things didn't go well. And then, oh my gosh, the thought was so there. You fuck it up. And then, so first and foremost, I have to have awareness of the process. We talk about that all the time where awareness is the first thing that you have to do, right? If you don't have awareness that you're self-sabotaging, if you don't have awareness that this behavior is happening, then you just don't have awareness of it, right? Rewind 10 years ago, I wasn't super connected. I had the narrative of like, man, why do I always mess things up? Man, I'm such a fuck up. I always screw things up. I'm such a loser, right? That's been my story my whole life. But I didn't have like the second part of it where it's like, why maybe? Why might that be a thing? So having the second part of it is like, oh, I'm trying to control a situation that feels unsafe to me. And that whole like bananas idea that like healthy, calm, we have a very safe relationship. We have a very safe home. Like it's so much different than the houses that we grew up in when we were kids. And yet we're both still like, I don't know what to do in this nice, healthy relationship. It feels very awkward and strange to me still, even though we've been together for, a while. Where was I going with this? I feel like you're looking at me like, you don't know where I was going.
Well, I'm not in your head.
Baby.
I know. I'm also like thinking about the ways that I'm relating, like how I think you were talking about like what's something that you can do because it's just you.
Yeah. So you have to have awareness. Okay. Thank you. See, we just get too far down these rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. Self-esteem. I think so much of this has to do with self-esteem as well.
Yeah. That's a hard place to start though.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. You have to start at the awareness part first. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there. That was totally, I was just like, for me, right? Mm-hmm. If they're like, you got to have self-esteem. I was like, well, fuck.
Well, I'm losing that battle.
Guess this isn't meant for me. And guess self-sabotage is my path.
What if that was the thing with life?
Right. You just need to believe in yourself.
Life's going to be everything that you want it to be. All you got to do is have self-esteem. Right. It's like, well, what about the rest of us? Right. I don't have that. So what's next? So, well, you can be an alcoholic. You can be an addict.
Right. These are your options.
Right.
These are your options. So like the awareness is a big deal for me because never once did I thought, how is this helping me? I've only thought of how is it hurting me? How is it hurting me? And I had all the reasons why it was hurting me, but yet I keep doing it. It's like, what? Why? Why am I picking this up?
How is this helping me?
How is this helping me?
Even as an adult, even at the point in your life where you're at, still looking at it through that lens of like, how is this helping me? I think that's really powerful.
It really just like gave me like it like removed a lens. Am I done self-sabotaging now because I have this awareness? Nope. But I have a new look at it. I have a new, like I'm seeing it from a new angle that I didn't have before.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh, that's a layer that now I don't have to try and that isn't covering up the picture. I can see here. So like, how is this helping me? And then getting curious, like we're learning how to be uncomfortable. And not in an uncomfortable because things are going really wrong, but being uncomfortable and doing healthy things, being uncomfortable in the hardness of taking care of yourself and self-love and doing these little things that build, that start to give you little tiny grains of sand in the jar that is self-esteem, that is worth, because it's so hard to fill that. It feels like you're putting sand into a strainer. So allowing it to fill the bottom, it'd be a solid glass jar and dropping in one act of kindness to yourself to create self-esteem.
You could take that. Are you mid-thought? Do we need to put a pin in something?
I am, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to come back to it. So go ahead and I'll try and keep it. It's because it's okay.
Keep going. I won't lose mine.
Are you sure? You and I are pretty good at that. So let's see if I can pull it back. Oh yes, the uncomfortableness, right? And not because we're great at hard things that are toxic and traumatic. And so, but we're not great at things that are healthy and that take time. Like it's that instant traumatic, instant gratification, like thinking about right now instead of later. Even though we say long game, right? We're like, how can I, like, what's going to help me right now? So just being asking yourself, are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to learn what it feels like to stay committed to yourself? Are you willing to experience what it feels like to have things go well? Are you willing to experience, I don't know, I haven't quite got it yet, but you have the awareness of how it's helping, and I know what the familiar looks like. Am I willing to sit in the unknown for the opportunity of something different? We're incredibly grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with us. Out of all the podcasts you could be listening to right now, you're here with Steph and Craig, and we are so grateful to have you here with us. We have a simple mission. We want to help you create better relationships and live your best life. And we need your help. We have a goal of reaching over 1 million people on YouTube. And you can help us achieve that goal by heading over there right now and hitting the subscribe button for the Steph and Craig Show. And also, make sure you click on that bell so you get notified of every new episode that we have coming out. And you can take it one step further by sharing this episode or another one of your favorites with your friends, your family members, or somebody who you think would benefit from hearing this. Every little bit helps because we believe we all do better when we heal together. Now let's get back to the show. Yeah, maybe it'll be worse. Probably not, though. That's the story that I tell myself to keep myself sabotaging. That's the story that I tell myself to keep myself in the fear, that I tell myself to keep myself small and from reaching out, to keep myself where in the role that other people are comfortable with me playing. And am I willing to try something different? Am I willing to let it be better? Am I willing to let it be better? Am I willing to actually allow space? Am I willing? I don't have it just yet, but it's along those lines.
I love the idea of looking at this from like having awareness of self-sabotage. And then the next question you ask yourself is, or not even just like ask yourself, how is this helping me? Like, what is, like, this is a loving act right now.
Yeah.
Right? This is a loving act right now. Not the awareness part, but so if we, because now I'm like,
how can I do this in a healthy way? How can I give myself the same love in a healthy way?
No, my brain's cracking open right now because I'm trying to, I'm reframing coping mechanisms as loving acts rather than shitty things that we have to change. Now, that's not saying like, oh, yeah, that coping mechanism that's really toxic and unhealthy is a loving act, but it is a loving act for a version of you when it started.
So if you're willing to do that, then what else are you willing to love yourself? Okay.
So like if we look at this idea of self-sabotage as a coping mechanism that we learn from childhood, right, as a way to control situations when we felt like we didn't have any control, that's a really loving act. Like that's a really smart thing that 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old Steph figured out how to do. And then she used that skill that she was taught, learned, programmed, right, observed, whatever it is. And then she knew, this is how I keep myself safe. What a loving fucking thing.
That's how much I'm willing to love myself.
What a loving thing, right? And then as an adult, suddenly having awareness of like, oh, I'm starting to self-sabotage. How loving is it that I'm trying to keep myself safe now? But because I'm an adult and because I've been doing a lot of work on myself and because I have awareness of that, I can frame it through this perspective of this is a loving act. What am I trying to keep myself safe from? What is coming up right now in me? So then I can see it through that lens of like, okay, this thing that's happening has triggered this coping mechanism. I'm not shaming myself. I'm not angry at myself. I'm not blaming it. This is actually an act of love, of preservation, right? And it's incredibly loving and kind thing that I'm trying to do for myself right now to keep myself safe and alive. And it's unhealthy. I can see it through that lens too, because I'm an adult and I can see things, right? I'm smart. And I know that it's unhealthy, but I don't need to criticize it. I don't need to be so judgmental about it. I don't need to shame myself about it. I don't need to get angry at myself about it. I don't need to spiral out into that stuff, right? We're overwhelmed by this podcast. We're overwhelmed by this show. We're trying to do really new things and put ourselves out there in new ways that might not seem, you know, I'm sure there's some people that are like, what are you guys talking about? And we're like, it's a really big deal for us to do some of the things that we're doing as well as some of the stuff that we're talking about. and have talked about on the podcast and continually plan on talking about. And that is triggering this part of us that doesn't like to be seen. So, okay, we're going to protect that part. We're going to love that part.
That was taught to keep secrets and be quiet and not talk.
So all of these things suddenly become acts of love, really big acts of self-love, trying to keep ourselves safe. They just don't work anymore because we're not in those environments anymore.
Right. So like, how can 43-year-old version of us reteach the 4-year-old that learn these coping mechanisms? So we're sitting here when we recognize this loving act, this awareness, how it was helping. It's like the image that I got, you've used it before, was like learning how to tie your shoes. Like in the kid that's like duct taping it.
Right,
or like
the little kid
knots.
that doesn't know how to tie their shoes, and you give them shoes and they turn out like, I tied my shoes and it's just this clusterfuck knot.
So you have the version of where they were yelled at, they were scolded, they were made fun of, they were beaten for not doing it right. All the things that they're just like, forget that, I'll never wear those. I'll figure out all the ways to, like, I just won't untie my shoes. I'll figure out how to put like all the ways that they'll come up with so they don't ever have to try and tie their shoes again. Right.
Maybe I just wear sandals all the time.
Maybe I'll just wear sandals all the time or no shoes. Like, I don't even like shoes. Right.
I know how to tie my shoes.
So my point that I was thinking, the vision that was coming of that is, instead of that, to where now we have all these reasons to not tie our shoes in a sense, right? All the ways that then maybe even make fun of other people for, you wear shoes with laces, like, just
so
like
1993.
That as 43-year-old us, we can be like, let's practice. Let's try. We can come in a loving way and show and be like, now keep in mind, 43-year-olds doesn't know how to tie the shoes either. So we don't know the outcome. We just know that it's safe to try. It's safe to try something new. Like, let's try it this way. What if we do it this way? What if we do it this way?
This is like big epiphany moments for me right now that we're having this conversation, because I don't know if I think I've heard it, like, how we hear so much information and consume so much information and ideas and everything like that. And I'm like, I'm sure I've heard this at some point along the way, but the whole idea of all of my coping mechanisms are acts of self-love that were implemented by a child to keep themselves safe.
Yeah.
Because, I have like a standard, I got like I have my standard coping mechanisms that are the same, like base coping mechanisms, like food, right, is one of the coping mechanisms that I've had since I was a kid. And it will shift and morph and kind of evolve in different ways, but it's just this base coping mechanism.
To self-soothe.
Yeah. And looking at all of those through this lens of like, those are acts of self-love and preservation. Perspiration. What is it? Preservation. I wonder why I can't say that word. Looking at those now through that lens, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm so fucking excited.
Right?
Because suddenly it's like, when I catch myself in a coping mechanism, even when it's like, because I have some really shitty ones where it's like, where I flip everything around and it's not my fault, it's your fault. You're the problem. I'm not the problem. Like,
I do that to you too.
All of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, how beautiful is it that that little boy figured out a way to keep himself safe,
right? And
like protect himself. Like, that's a massive act of self-love and self-preservation. I thought I was going to get it that time.
So that's how willing you are to love yourself.
Yes.
That's how willing you are to take care of yourself and nurture yourself.
And then,
so having that, you can like, am I willing to do it like this? I'm already showed myself through every year that I've been alive that I am willing to do that. Over, if you are here, if you're like still on this earth, if you are still here, it's because you have loved yourself enough to keep going. Even if it's been toxic, even if it's like something that you do not like, you have found a way to keep yourself going. And now, because you already show how strong you are you willing to try a different way? You take all of that love and try and turn it into a healthy action towards yourself.
Well, I'm looking.
Are you willing to learn more?
Absolutely. And I'm looking, because you talked about like the whole shoe tying thing. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to approach it with the same thought process. Like how would I teach a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
Right. The 5-year-old that's like, I'm really scared right now, so I'm going to eat 4 bowls of ice cream.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, buddy, like you can eat 4 bowls of ice cream, but then your tummy's you're probably not going to feel very good afterwards. You might feel really sick afterwards, right? Like you're not going to feel, I might feel kind of sick. Like what if we just have 1 bowl of ice cream?
Right.
And then maybe, we just have a glass of water and we can talk about what we're feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And so I love the idea of being able to reframe it all through this lens of like acts of self-love, and then being able to just approach it as, okay, I have an adult brain, I have an adult body, I have an adult version of myself, I have a higher consciousness, I have this new awareness. I can use that awareness to help that part of me and really start to explore, because I think a lot of times in our relationship and as well as in life, but these coping mechanisms will get activated subconsciously, where you won't like up on the surface, the water's fine and everything's good, right? And then suddenly you're like, why am I behaving this way?
Right.
What's going on? Why am I suddenly acting like an asshole? Or why have I started to self-sabotage and, can fuck everything up? Everything on the surface looks really good, but what underneath the surface has caused that disruption?
We got to get into the murk.
Right. But I love, like, I can't get over this idea of they're just acts of self-love and being able to create an environment where I can survive and be safe. And now I just don't need to do that anymore. Now I can do it in a different way. And that whole idea of like, well, now, know better, do better. Like, fuck off, Dr. Phil, right? I remember hearing that shit back in the 90s when Dr. Phil was doing it. Do you know he started his own, like, TV network thing? We could do a whole nother podcast on Dr. Phil. Maybe Dr. Phil will come on the podcast. I'll talk to Dr. Phil. But I used to shame myself with that. Know better, do better. Originally,
I know better. Why am I not doing better?
Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
why do I keep doing the same shit
so
when
like,
I know better?
I know these things as an adult.
I've had that
and
same
yet I can't stop. I know now why I self-sabotage.
What's wrong with me?
And why can't I stop doing it?
I'm broken. I'm stupid.
Right?
I'm worthless because I keep doing these
Because
things.
the part of me that is self-sabotaging isn't 43 years old.
Right?
It's 5.
Trying to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Try to explain to a 5-year-old a concept that your 43-year-old brain and emotional body and lived experience has and understands, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. So I have to try to explain it through that. I'm excited for some ice cream. Next time I need some ice cream, I'm going to be like, man, look at you. Yeah. Such a big act of self-love. Why don't you just have a little bit, right? You don't need to eat the whole fucking gallon. But I'm really glad that we talked about this.
Me too.
I'm really glad that you had your epiphany a moment and awareness of why you're doing it. And I'm glad that we brought this up on the podcast and talked about it.
Me too. Thank you.
What does the whole self-love thing resonate with you?
Yeah. It's tapping in for me.
Yeah.
I'm connecting to it.
Cool. Right?
That was cute.
So to recap,
Right.
we self-sabotage because we're trying to control the outcome.
Yeah. What we know to be safe.
Right. What we know to be safe. And like we say all the time on the show that there's probably people that I'm sure there's people that can relate. Like 100% people relate to this.
Yeah. This is probably old news to somebody listening right now. They're like, but they're probably like, hey, that's awesome. I'm glad you're talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you realize it.
I'm excited to implement this new awareness. I'll keep you posted on the podcast. What happens next time, Craig? That's that part of me that like seeks your, not approval. I definitely seek your approval at times. What was it now?
Love. My attention. So you know that you were still loved.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Let's just like. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
This is a really cool episode that we just did that we're really grateful for. And I'm excited. Like, I'm kind of really giddy right now. I'm excited for what this is going to change, at least for me, where I'm at in my healing. And share this podcast with somebody. Share it with somebody that you found. Oh, I can't even talk, babe.
Share it. Share it with somebody you find like that you care about. Share it with yourself. Like, listen to it again. Sometimes when you have these big ones and you're like all of these aha moments.
I'll have to listen to it again.
If this was this for you, then like play it again. What do you hear on the second time? What other awarenesses? But yes, share it, put it out there. Do you know somebody who, now you got to be careful too. I can say like, you self-sabotage. So listen to this, you know,
Do it. It's going to help them.
Do it. But thank you, because like it's our goal to help as many people as possible, to reach as many people as possible, to help build better relationships.
Yeah, we have a
better
mission
lives.
to help you
Yes.
create better relationships and live your best life.
Yes.
And we totally believe that all of those things are possible, especially when we do it together.
Yes.
So help us on our mission and share the podcast with somebody. Share it with everybody and subscribe. Like, we don't say that enough. We should probably say that way more.
Yeah, subscribe.
One of the easiest things that you can do to help this podcast is just click subscribe wherever you're listening to, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or iTunes or wherever. There's 1,000 places to follow and find podcasts now. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, just click that subscribe button. That helps immensely. And then you can like do the other thing where you click notifications and then you get updated every time there's a new episode. And yeah, all of those things really help the podcast grow and expand. And we deeply, deeply appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
Not only do we want to help more people with the podcast, but if you want to help the podcast continue to grow in its reach, as well as the type of guests that we get to bring on and the things that we get to do with the podcast, this is the way. That's the way to do it. So,
yes. And this was a big episode. So if you find yourself going through, like, now's a great time to get a drink of water, to move your body, get some fresh air, and just allow a little bit of movement in your space while you're allowing all of this to integrate.
We can't say
you
words.
say that word.
Interrogate when your body's trying to
you
interrogate.
allow this to like infuse into your cells, that word. So thank you.
Yeah. And next time you catch yourself self-sabotaging, just remember it's an act of love. And get curious about why and bring awareness to some of the subconscious behaviors that might be underneath that act of self-love and where it all began. And remember what, babe?
Plan for the best. Expect the greatest.
No, we love you. We
love you.
We care
I wasn't
about
sure.
you.
I was thinking at this point, like, this came and I'll say, like, hug your inner child. Remember, hug your inner
I love
child.
that.
Remember
Yeah.
to hug your inner child today.
Yeah. And we honestly, genuinely
Yes.
believe that you have the ability to heal. We believe in you and we love you and we care about you.
Yes. And we can do
uh,
this together.
Absolutely. So plan for the best.
Expect the greatest.
Expect the best.
Plan for the best.
How on earth do
Plan
we
for the
not...
best. Expect the greatest.
That's
Expect
not
the
it.
best. Plan for the greatest.
Yeah.
Okay, cheat sheet.
I'm literally going to get
Pause.
tattoos of that on my arms, but we'll see you guys.
Expect the best.
We'll see-
Plan for the greatest.
See you all
That's
next
it.
episode.
Got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me. We were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.